So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and pass it over to Russ and let him kick this thing off, and let's have a good, constructive chat on this. Go ahead, Russ.
Hey, thanks very much, Bob. First off, appreciate you setting this up, accommodating us through Zoom, and kind of setting up the parameters and ground rules for this discussion. Welcome, everybody. What I want to do is just in my mind's eye, describe to you what I see as the objective for this meeting. And it's to come away with a better or common understanding of the history, background, issues, and concerns regarding the use of cameras in residential settings. So I don't know ever going to be no issues, questions, or concerns about it, or trade-offs, but I think that in order for you to have a position on it, whether it's in favor, opposed, or undecided, especially one way or the other, more on the polar ends of very much in favor or very much opposed, it's really important to have the history and background and all of the facts in this, in terms of what's been done in the past, what work has already been done on this. We're not the first group, or this is not the first time we're thinking about this issue. This has come up over and over again, time and time in other states as well, and in other settings out in public. So it's important to understand the background and history, what's been done or attempted legislatively, what other advocacy groups have done, and so forth and so on. And in this particular group tonight, what I think we can hope to do is get a common understanding or a better understanding of that background, the issues, the concerns, the work done, and what other people on this call and in this group feel. What are our views? And one thing that I do want to stress is that everybody's view needs to be respected, as Bob said, with the rules. I find it very interesting, some things just are kind of that funny bone type black hole thing, but in a group of 4,700 people, right? We're at 4,699 right now. Maybe we're over 4,700. But, and I realize a lot of those folks are just, benevolent, well-intended friends who are trying to support us and will send an email or, just show an optic by being a part of the group. But with that said, that we had 300 and somewhat responses to the poll, 314 in favor, 29 needing more information, undecided, 26 opposed. So it's 85%, 15%. But, under 400 responses for a group of the 4,700 people. And then of the people that responded on the call tonight, we have 24 people. So it either tells me that people are still having dinner, they're on vacation, or there's a lot of talk and hot air about the topic, but when it really comes time to sitting down and, rolling up your sleeves, people don't really want to engage for whatever reason. So the 24 of us here on this call right now, I guess, are the hardcore, right? The sole, group of people who have a view on this. And I don't think that everybody on this call or in this meeting is in favor. I do see this problem. I'm most interested, I think, at this point in the undecided group, because I think those in favor are very strongly in favor, always have been, always will. But maybe they don't have all the information either about the history and the trade-offs and what would it really mean? Because there's sometimes you have to be afraid of what you ask for, because you might just get it and then be dealt with things you have to deal with because of that, whether it's costs or other headaches and problems. So it may not be all one-sided and a no-brainer. The people who are strongly opposed may not have all the information either, and they might just be looking at it from one side. But the undecided folks are the ones that I think are important, because that's like in an election. Those are the swing votes, the ones that if they just get a little more information and you do a little more campaigning, they go one way or the other. So, I mean, let's just understand, out of the 24 of us here right now, I mean, who is undecided?
I guess physically raise your hand so we can see.
Yeah, is that Rob? The Rob that's out there, is that Rob Sparling? Maybe we got to unmute Rob.
Oops, hold on. It just jumped away. There he is. Okay.
That Rob Sparling? That's Rob Sparling, right? So I do remember, because Rob's weighed in on the page and has been part of the thread saying, he really in order to get behind it, you need more information. Okay, Rob's unmuted. So you are Rob Spaulding, right?
That's me, Russell. How are you?
Good, good. Hey, how are you? Thanks for joining.
No, thank you. I've switched to behind it, but you've read my posts. I'm behind it, but I would like more information on it. Just to preface that, I'm trying to make this an intellectual decision entirely. I'm thankful that I've never had a situation where my son was hurt, and I'm entirely respectful of people in that position and their emotion behind it. But I'm trying to make this an entirely intellectual decision. So more information would be helpful, which is why I'm here.
Thank you, Rob. Absolutely. And really appreciate your respect for others and stepping very lightly on that in terms of, you know, people's feelings and their history, whether they've had a loved one who's been affected or not. That'll change your perspective in a heartbeat. So I think hopefully, Rob, through the course of this session, we'll fill in a lot of the blanks and give you some of the information or all of it in terms of what the details are. And I do want to just interject that we have Sue Reek out here. And I know that Suzanne Reek, you know, the president of the National Suffolk Autism Society of America, is on mute right now, but, you know, Sue is very much involved in this and instrumental on a lot of levels, from a legislative, from a lobbyist, from the presidency of an agency standpoint, and as a parent. So I do want to give Sue some time here, kind of uninterrupted time, to speak about the background and the update on, you know, what's in the works, what's being done, and maybe fill in some of those details, Rob, around, well, if there was a bill or there were cameras in residence, how would that work? How would it look? What would it mean? It's one thing to pop cameras up on a wall in a hallway, but it's another thing to operationalize it and write a procedure and design a process and put controls and policies around it. And that's where the devil's in the details. So, and that might allow people to decide if they saw or had a sense as to what a bill might look like and what it would include or cover, how it would work, as to whether they could get behind it or not. That's the way it's going to work in the Assembly and the Senate when you put a bill out there, based on what's in that bill and how plausible they think it is. You know, people will get behind it or not. So we'll do that. But let me ask too, if there's anybody on here that's opposed. We have to figure out somehow for people to raise their hand or to tell us if they're opposed to it, so we can make sure that we hear from them as well. Otherwise, it'll be a jamboree of all people in favor, and we can all go home. Rob's undecided, but he's leaning, I know, but he wants more information. Anybody opposed? It's okay to be opposed. It's a democracy. Okay. It's hard. Is somebody, all right, we don't have anybody opposed on this call.
If somebody doesn't know how to raise your hand with the electronic method, just raise your physical hand and I'll unmute you.
Okay, Rochelle is undecided. Thank you, Rochelle. I hope I'm saying your name right. Rochelle is undecided. So it's perfectly fine to be undecided because there's a lot of things to take in and digest about this. And again, depending on your perspective, if you had a loved one that was abused, you probably would become very undecided quickly. If you haven't, you might tread lightly and say, you know, it's a privacy issue. It's the sanctity of a home. I did put out a PowerPoint that summarized some of those pros and cons, but why don't we, at this point, Sue, would it be okay, would you mind if I turned it over to you to give you some airtime to tell us your thoughts on this and work that's being done?
Sure. Well, there has been bills already introduced, but haven't gone anywhere. Since 2013, there was a bill introduced, but it's just languishing there. So I think because it's too large, it's very ambiguous. So my thought is, you know, my son lives in a group home. He's nonverbal. He has been the subject of a couple Justice Center complaints. Just recently, a staff member smacked him in the face just for reaching for a box of cereal. And unfortunately, the way our Justice Center is set up, the preponderance of evidence is higher than it is for the Nassau County Police Department, which seems ridiculous to me. So because not more than one person witnessed this, nothing was really done to this person. This person was not added to any database to prevent that person from going to another agency. and possibly doing something similar or worse to someone else's loved one. So, I think in this day and age, we have cameras everywhere. We have cameras when you go to use your ATM card, when you really go anywhere. Buses, schools, and I think we all realize that our children do deserve some degree of privacy, but we're talking about common areas. We're not talking about in their bedrooms right now. We're not talking about in the bathroom. And the way that we were going to have one of the senators introduce this was to say that this footage would only be used if there was an allegation of abuse. And the police department would be the ones that would have access to these, this footage. So I think really there's no negative to it at this point. I'm willing to listen to other people, but I just really don't see it as any negative. I mean, there's too many cases. Just recently, I'm sure everybody's aware of the case for one of the HRC agency where a person was forced to eat regurgitated food. And this was on a video where they were being smacked. So, there's countless cases, the child on the treadmill. There's, we have to have a voice for our children. And unfortunately, I'm ex-law enforcement. I'm a retired NYPD sergeant. And I think that the, law enforcement having access to this footage will also protect staff members as well. I mean, if they're not doing anything wrong, why would they be opposed to it? It protects them as well. I know some children will just repeat things that are said to them. And a lot of times staff has been also accused of things that might not be accurate. So I think it would help our children and it would also help staff. And that's, I'm willing to fight for this. And we have a lobbyist that's going to be helping us. My organization is taking the standpoint that we want to push for cameras. And I think we have a better shot than, the group that's been trying for 7 years and hasn't gotten anywhere.
Thank you very much, Sue. Really, really good summary there. Comments, reactions, thoughts from other people? Ellen Alexander, we got a.
Hi, I can't raise my hand because you made me a co-host, but what I want to say is I think Sue is right on target. I don't know Sue. We don't know each other. We haven't spoken, but the idea, I'm on the incident review committee for our agency, and so many incidents come before us and they don't have corroborating evidence. Only one person saw it, so therefore it can't be the allegation doesn't stand up, and it's a frustrating situation. However, there are times when either staff or some of the people we serve themselves videotape things. And as soon as one of those come up, there it is. There's no question because it's already been taped. So I think that it's a very big statement for it being in favor. My son's 51. He's been in a group home 28 years. I've heard this pros and cons for this camera, for years. And the biggest con is it's a family, it's a home, it's their place to live, and that's the biggest thing you're going to hear about the negatives on this. Maybe from some staff, but if staff is against it, then they have a reason to be against it. They should like it. It helps them. It saves them from getting allegations against them. It is a home, but these homes are paid for by the state. People that are in our homes, who serve our people are wonderful. We know how wonderful most of them are. If there's a bad apple in there, we have no way of, controlling that if something is done and it's not seen. So okay. I've been in favor of cameras for years. My son is less verbal. He's more verbal now than he was years ago. But I think we serve a lot of people who are less verbal or nonverbal who can't even make a claim. So we've got to consider maybe the layers of people. Maybe we have to start with the homes that have the less verbal people in them. Maybe people who are more verbal have more of a say that they don't want this in their own home. That's just a suggestion. So I know families, look at it differently also. People do we give the families a choice? Once the agency or a law goes in, you know, just like what happened with these guidelines, it's the agencies still have to follow through. So it's, if we get the law in, then we have options as to how much we want to, they have to or don't have to institute it. Thank you.
Okay, so we got a slow start, but we're starting to get a few people to raise their hands. So I'm going to go in order that you raise your hand. I see you, Angela, you have your physical hand up, but you're about third or fourth in line, so we definitely will get to you. The next person is going to be Noran, and I've just asked you to unmute. If you want to go ahead and unmute your, there you go. Go ahead, Noran.
Thank you for holding this tonight. I really appreciate it personally. I'm in favor of cameras, but I'm also very much in favor of audio. The reason being is 8 years ago, I don't know if anybody had heard about Pinnacle Road or not, but anyhow, as of recent, what happened was before all the COVID, I was noticing my son's PTSD kicking in, and I knew something was wrong and nobody would listen, so I put a recorder in his room. And on there, it was a staff member for 20 minutes barraging him verbally and smacking him. You could hear the smack on his brief.
Wow.
So that's mild compared to 8 years ago, believe it or not. And without that audio, there would have been no way, and nobody was listening to me, even though he was losing weight again and all the signs were there, nobody was willing to listen. So I'm a firm believer in audio. And most recently, after pandemic started, I tried to tell them something was wrong with him through a screen, and it was on TV. And I kept saying, something is seriously wrong, please let me assess him. For 23 days, they let him sit there with a broken kneecap without any care. I had it on video through a screen window of him telling them something is wrong with his leg and him curled up in a ball in a chair. So without that video, there would have been no proof. OPWDD investigated, it was founded as neglect. The agency is now coming back, and because they investigate themselves, they're mad. Because it was founded by OPWDD, they're saying that I carried him around like a baby the day before shutdown and I dropped him. I can't lift 148 pounds, I just can't. So there's a lot behind the scenes with agencies. The staff that I believe in his house are really good staff. I have more of an issue with the people above not doing and supporting not just the individuals, but also the staff, and support and accepting the fact that sometimes they do screw up, and just say it. But I do believe in audio. I do believe in video. It's just a question of how to go about this.
Okay, so thank you, Norianne. The next person we have is Linda. I'm going to ask Linda to unmute. You can go ahead and speak when you unmute yourself, Linda. There you go.
Hello. I'm for the cameras, but I'm also for the audio because I believe that they will figure out where the cameras are and they'll make sure what they're doing to our sons or daughters is done in an area where there is no camera, like the bedroom or bathroom. My son has been hurt many, many times. The Justice Center investigates it, and it always comes back the same, unfounded. Only twice was it founded. One man was fired, and another woman was transferred to another house. I feel that if there was audio, Brian's nonverbal, so they couldn't also prep him for answers, because when I heard he got hurt and I went to the house, by the time I got there, I said, Brian, who hurt you? And Brian will normally just tell me, leg hurt, arm hurt, whatever hurts on him. He had that name down pat, Gary, and he kept saying it. And Gary lives in the house, so and I know that it wasn't Gary that did it because he had a black eye, and Gary is not mobile. So I believe that the Justice Center drops the ball all the time. They don't thoroughly investigate these people. And I truly believe if we have audio video in the common areas, the audio will pick up if they're being abused in another area that's like off limits, like the bedrooms or the bathroom. And I think it's a shame that we started talking about this at least 10, 12 years ago, maybe even longer, when Brian was in DDI on Long Island. But this still never came, and it's still it's still a problem that all of us are still suffering through, because we can't help our children unless we know what happened to them.
Okay, thanks, Linda. The next person in line will be Rob. Let me find you. Here you are. I'm gonna unmute you and lower your hand. Go ahead.
Hey, everybody. Sue, do you have a bill on that's pending that we could look at? Not now, but.
It's being worked on now. We have somebody through the lobbyist firm that's working on it. So when I get closer, I can share some of it. My only issue is that it's hard to share too much at one time, because there are other groups, not my group and not this group, that want to kind of take things over. So we're just trying to be careful, and we're going to try to have someone that actually works professionally on writing bills, write something, and then possibly, we can present it to the group.
And that's from the Autism Society of America's Long Island chapter is behind that?
Right now we are, yes. I mean, I have to see what's written first and if it needs to be changed. So it's in the early stages right now. We just want to know really if people are supportive, are going to get behind having cameras in group homes. So it's still in the infancy stages right now.
Okay.
I don't think they're in session right now anyway, either of the, the House or the Assembly. So it's really no big mad rush yet.
Okay. Bob, is now a good time for me to talk about my thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, your hand was raised. I didn't start the clock, but go ahead. I'll start it now, and we'll see. We don't have to stay too stringent to the clock thing, I think.
Well, feel free to cut me off. I had just jotted down my main points for the conversation. Again, I'm incredibly respectful of the situation. My Irish is coming out just hearing the few comments. I'm trying to do this intellectually again. I can't imagine. I really can't. So my questions relate to, is there a precedent on this? Does OMH have cameras in any of their facilities? Does Office of Children and Family Services? Is there any other or similar entity that has cameras set up that we could look at to kind of build off of and learn from and what we're trying to approach? I don't know the answer to that question. The other is obviously accountability of this. Who's would be accountable for it? If the bill puts it in on the agencies, and then it has to come out of the agency budgets now. So that leads to another issue. Who's going to pay for it all? Who's going to maintain it? Like Russell said, that's my point as well. If the camera's on the wall, that's one thing, but where does the camera feed to? Is it a hard drive in the residence manager's office, or is it at some kind of central site? And is it secured? Is it hackable? Because safety is number one, but dignity is number two for my boy. I always have to think like that. So these are technological questions that are well beyond me, but this is part of it. So that staff member who is doing something wrong can't get to it, that it's secured and other people can't watch what's happening, because even though it's a common area, it's still, it wouldn't be a fetch for my son to run into a common area without any clothes on. And these things could happen. The other is, so that's the security of it. The access of it, Sue mentioned law enforcement only. So that's the other part. That leads to the investigative bodies. Is it the Justice Center? Is it Disability Rights New York, who also has a mandate to investigate these things, which is funny because they sue each other for access and really go nowhere from my limited understanding of that. And would the parent ever have access to that, or a guardian or a family member, and under what scenarios? I mean, I'm going real specific here because I want to have this all fleshed out while we go forward. I absolutely agree. If there's a camera, I think the audio should be part of it. I think that's a very, very legitimate point to make that could catch things that are happening outside of camera shot. I'm not in law enforcement, but I am familiar with the system. And, you know, a true predator is not going to do it where the camera is. They're going to do it in the bathroom or in the private area. So the audio might help catch that small number of people that are really need to get out.
So, all right, Rob, I don't want to cut you off, but I'm going to just jump in, and we're at a little bit over the 3-minute thing. I can speak to one of your questions, and that's from the security and technical side standpoint of it. I work for a security company. We do a ton of camera systems for companies mostly because, you know, as we know, this isn't yet legal to be in adult homes. But as far as the security of it, something like this would be put when the focus of the cameras or the need for the cameras are to potentially catch staff or anybody on the premise doing something wrong. Though that stuff is put in a lockbox. The power is not reachable, so they can't unplug it. Typically, the data is stored on the device on a hard drive inside the box, and you would have access to it. Not you or us, but the police would have access to it over a secure internet line and access it when they need to, if, you know, in the event of an investigation. And that's pretty much how that would work. As far as you know, anything else, as far as some of the other questions, that's kind of above my pay grade. But yeah, I would imagine, I think Sue answered a few of those questions earlier, or at least touched on them. But I don't know if you want to, Sue, if you wanted to expand on any of the other questions that he had. And Angela, I see you are next after this brief chat with you're next, Angela. So go ahead, Sue, if you'd like to comment a little bit more.
You know, I'm not too technical myself. You know, I had a typewriter in college writing my papers, so I'm pretty limited on my technical ability. But from what I understand, it would be on a cloud, and that these cameras are not expensive to purchase. And we talk about law enforcement. I think when there's an investigation, I think law enforcement could include the parents and, you know, to see about viewing them. But I know a lot of people have said at other meetings that I've attended, they're worried about, you know, like you were saying, your son being naked, running around into the, you know, dining room being taped. I don't think these things will be able to be hacked, so people will be viewing them in another country. I think that was mentioned at one of the meetings that I went to, Pam's meeting. And I think that really is very far out there. So I think this will be where it's only going to be viewed if there's an allegation, or maybe even they might have, you know, like say a house manager. It's really kind of still vague right now. I think we're just trying to work on, you know, the fine points of it. But again, I really don't see a negative to having the cameras. I mean, you know, there's really no way of corroborating someone's story better than having a videotape of the incident.
Okay, so Rob, I didn't want to silence you, but I know you had a couple more things you might have wanted to mention. I'm going to get on to some other people, and if we should have time to get back to if you want to hold those other comments you may have had. All right, so the next person will be Angela. I'm going to ask to unmute Angela and let you go, and a few more people after you as well.
Okay, hi. Thank you for putting this together. December 30th, what happened was Johnny was coming home with bruises on his arms, and we didn't know what was wrong with him. And I suspected something going on. We had 2 new staff there. We had other staff that's been there for years. So I found something on the internet, I bought it on Amazon, and I put a camera in his room. The staff, no one knew that I put the camera in there. The agency didn't know that I put the camera in there. Within 2 days, I caught not one, but I caught 2 people hurting my son. Unfortunately, I didn't have any audio. I just had, we just had video. And we saw people one particular staff was throwing things at my son, throwing calendars at him from the floor, throwing papers on the floor, throwing things at him. Johnny, he wanted to get out of his room, and the staff, and Johnny is a big guy. My son is 6'2". I can get all emotional about this. 6'2", 225 pounds. And this other brute went ahead and pushed him into the room. And Johnny, even like, you can even see on the video that Johnny flinches back. Long story short, between the two of them, I went to the agency right away. I showed them the video. I had the drive, and I ended up taping everything. I showed them the video. They fired those two people immediately without even going anyplace. But I wanted more. I wanted these guys to never work with our population again. I had to protect everybody. So of course, then I went to the Justice Center. This happened in December. Just now, I got the end. You know, they closed my case. Both of them got third-degree abuse, third-degree neglect, which is really a slap on the wrist. It's not really much, but anybody that goes to hire any other agency that goes and puts in a background check, it'll come up that it was substantiated evidence and that they should look into it further. So whether or not an agency wants to hire them, knowing that, that's up to them. They could still hire them. So I'm just saying that I agree with the cameras, and I know that we're looking at cameras just in the common areas, but if you can't get the cameras in the, let's say, the bedrooms, which, you know, a lot of people wouldn't go for, then you have to have audio going in the bedroom so that if there is abuse, or the bathroom or the hallway, that if there is abuse, you're going to hear. I'm sure my son, you can see my son yelling, but I couldn't hear him, but I can tell that this was going on. And we have to protect our kids.
Okay, thanks, Angela. The next we have, EK just dropped off. Well, maybe not. Here you are. Okay, good. You lowered your hand, but I think you were next. So EK's iPad, I'm not sure what your name is, but if you want to go ahead and unmute and speak, you're up.
Hi, this is Karen Stern. Hi, Sue. So I really have just a lot more questions, because of course I want safety. And I think that, Angela, you brought up a great point about having audio in the bedrooms. And I think that is going to be key. I mean, the Justice Center gets thousands and thousands and thousands of abuse reports every year, and you know the percent that actually comes out with anything is so minimal. It's, you know, in the hundreds, and we know our kids are being abused. But without them speaking and without those witnesses, this is really the only option, and they know that. So it's almost odd that this hasn't been brought up before, and I think we do have to just come in very strongly. The state audited the Justice Center, and if you look at the report, I mean, it's pathetic. The way it's run is so poorly run. Cases have multiple numbers it's assigned to them. They don't even understand whose case it is. They're not going to help us. You know, we have to kind of move on from them somehow. So I don't know. We really have to get some good help on this, and some, you know, all the issues you brought up were just brilliant. And I don't know. I just really just wanted to say, Sue, thanks.
Okay, thanks. The next person is Pam. If you want to go ahead, Pam, and unmute your connection, you're up.
Hi. I'm going to try to run through these points fast because there's a lot of them. I also, like Ellen, work on the Incident Review Committee, and as everybody has said about, and I saw people in the chat typing about the Justice Center. It is very true. The Justice Center comes back almost 90% of the time unfounded, and they take anywhere from 3 months to over 3 years to do an investigation. But one of the key reasons that we need cameras is because that would change all the unfoundeds. The unfoundeds are because they will only do it if there's a double witness. It does not even matter how high functioning the individual is. Individuals are not taken at their word. So if a low functioning individual, somebody mentioned, like they said to their son, who hit you? And they say David, and they even stick to their story, that is not enough proof. To where a visual, like Angela said, changes things because they need the proof to back it up. So we actually would be giving the Justice Center with cameras ammunition to finally be able to do their job. So that's just one thing. As far as people talking about in the bedrooms, whether it be audio or video, my personal opinion is we need to get this passed. Once you start entering the bedrooms, anybody with privacy issues is going to go off the wall. We have to remember that audio and video in the hallways, even though it won't see things, when you're doing an investigation, it still helps to document things. If a worker goes into somebody's bedroom and is in there for a certain amount of time and comes out and then there's injuries, it would really help to lead an investigation. So I agree that we need audio. It protects everybody, because also sometimes if a staff is like roughhousing or doing something with the child, their inflection, their tone is needed. So that's the other thing. The other thing about cameras that we have to look at, somebody mentioned how many years we've been fighting for cameras. There's a lot of things that have changed from 10 years ago, that it's very important for whether we have people who are undecided, people who are against, and for our politicians to understand. Years ago, staff in group homes was a much older, much more experienced type of worker. Today, every agency is facing rapid turnover, inexperienced help, and they're always shorthanded. So that changes the level of quality of workers, which is why abuse is up. The other thing is, we always in the past, we believed in mandating reported. So if you're a direct care person or a nurse or a school teacher and you see abuse, you have to come forward. But it's a different era today. If I'm working in a group home and I'm 23 years old and I'm 5'3", and my coworker is 6'2", and he's beating up an autistic young man, why wouldn't I think he would beat me up? All he has to do is go on Facebook, find out anything about me, and he can grab me in any parking lot and take care of me too. We've had workers threaten other workers because they are afraid they don't want them to come forward. These are not things that we had to deal with 10, 12, 15 years ago. So it's very important to notice the changes. Bob spoke about the closed circuit systems. So as far as like somebody grabbing the information and putting our children up naked or something, I think that is a beatable situation. And as far as people saying it takes away the privacy, I think sadly, we have to admit, especially for the lower functioning population, sadly, they lost their privacy due to the disability. If they need to be wiped, if they need to be showered, if they need to be dressed, they've already lost so much privacy. They're on 10-minute bed checks, or some are in line of sight. They never have privacy. So that's something that sadly we have to think about. So it's much more important that we protect them from being beaten or abused. As far as the higher functioning population, there really is a line, because some people say, hey, I'm independent enough and I don't want it. And somebody mentioned earlier, maybe it should be on a house-by-house basis. There really is a different type of very high-functioning individual who can advocate for themselves, and they are self-advocates. They belong to SANI. But there's also guys who are in the middle of being high-functioning. If you have any history, okay, in your BSP or your years with an organization, we had a mother on NYADD who said last week, her son went back and reported that he went to the mall and he went here and he went there. And they said, that's it, your visiting privileges are gone. A lot of our individuals speak out of turn, don't tell truths. They're unhappy about a staff, they'll make something up. If you have one incident of that on your record that you tell a false, they will hold that and will not take you at your word when you mention abuse. So we still even have to protect the high functioning individuals too. So I think that's all I wanted to run off. If anybody has any questions, but I think I covered everything, kind of what everybody was saying. Thanks, guys.
Bob's on mute.
Pam, yep, I'm unmuted. Yeah, definitely let you go over time. I could listen to you all day, Pam. You've always got, you're always so well spoken, so I don't think anybody minded you going over by a minute or so there. I am going to go on to Raquel. I'm going to pronounce her name. I think that's right. If I can find you on the screen. Oh, there you are. Okay, go ahead. Is it Rachel or Raquel? You have to unmute yourself. I just hit the unmute button. There you are.
He's back on mute.
Did you mute yourself again? Okay, let's try that one more time. Go ahead.
is off.
Okay. Okay. It's Rochelle. Thank you. And I really appreciate this because I have a lot of questions and it's very clear to me that many parents here through personal bitter experience have confronted this issue. My son also resides in a group home and he's one of those middle functioning people. So that's a lot where my questions were coming from. But I guess I have two main questions still, which is the point that was made earlier, which is that if a staff person is determined to abuse, they will find a place to do it where it will not be captured. And that concerns me, especially if you're not going to have cameras in the bedroom or the bathroom, which is the common areas where abuse takes place. So that's still, it's more of a pragmatic issue about how effective this will be. Although I see in the larger homes and with homeaways, my son's in a small apartment, so there's really not much of a common area. It's basically bedrooms and one small common area. So I don't know how effective it would be there, but I could see in the larger residences where it could be useful to have it in the common areas. I guess my other issue is, we seem to have accepted the fact that the Justice Center is just not useful, to put it mildly. They're not doing their job. And to me, I would like to see a little more emphasis on having an accountable oversight organization, because neither, DRNY nor the Justice Center seem to be fulfilling that role. Because no matter where we put cameras, ultimately, there has to be enforcement. And, I fear it's going to be left up to many of us to sneak cameras into our children's bedrooms, to monitor the situation. And I don't think that's a very good resolution on a systemic level. But thank you all so much. I really do appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we have Erin. If I can find Erin. There you are. Unmute.
Hi. All right, can we hear me? So I agree with all of the points. I am definitely for the cameras. My brother lives in a group home and has had some incidences that have gone unfounded. And there is also a medical benefit to some of the cameras because many autistic kids also have seizures. And like, for instance, my brother came home with like 2 black eyes and bruises all over his head. And someone at his house was like, oh, he probably had a seizure and fell down. Well, it's a much larger issue if he has a seizure, and we actually need to know that. So he is one of those now, like within line of sight, but still has unexplained bruises. And so, you do need to be careful as to how you approach it, because you also then don't want to like blame someone in the house or whatever. So I do think the cameras would just eliminate all of those question marks. And to your point of like, an abuser is going to find the secret place to do it in. That is true. But there's also like in most of these houses, no one is ever working alone. There's always another staff member with them. So if the chances are there's not 2 bad apples working at the same time, and hopefully that other person would be able to protect the other resident that has having the abuse on them or something. You'd hope for some humanity amongst this population. And I also agree with Pam that everyone is about 25 and under, and the turnover is like twice a year at least. And I think that most of these kids, any other job that they get, they're on camera 24/7. If you work at a grocery store, if you work at a McDonald's, if you work at a retail store, all opening jobs you're on camera. I mean, I worked corporate for 20 years, and the only place I wasn't on camera was literally in the bathroom. It's everywhere's on camera. I feel like we have to eliminate the whole privacy of the staff. Like you should be allowed to be on camera on that point. You're not going to work and doing something you don't want people to see. So if you're at work at the house, you're at work. So those are kind of my points. I think there's medical benefits. I think you do weed out the bad apples. And I also think overall, for the staff that get uncomfortable if they see someone doing something bad, because you easily, like as a human, you do get uncomfortable when you see wrongdoing. it makes it a more comfortable work environment because you know it's on camera. You can go to your supervisor and you can say, I really think that you might want to review the cameras on this. Like, I don't agree with the way this was handled, or something like that. You have a little bit of a backup for you. So it just makes it a better work environment for everyone there. Those are kind of my points.
Okay. All right, Pam, I think did you want to comment on something Aaron said, or did you want to add some more?
Somebody had asked, I think it was the person right before Erin had said, if the cameras aren't in the bedroom or something, how is it going to help? And I just want to explain something too when an investigation is done. So somebody said like their loved one comes home and they have bruises all over their arm, and they might mention a name, they might not mention a name. And then whether it's your agency or the Justice Center that do the investigation. So what happens is without camera, if they say, oh, you know, Michael did not have any bruises when he came home from program at 3 o'clock, but bruises were found the next morning. What they try to do is they try to establish a timeline. And then they interview the staff and ask, were there any behaviors? And they do a whole investigation if it's a good agency. And what'll happen is, even if the camera is not in the bedroom, if the camera shows an individual walking into someone's bedroom, whether they're animated because they're aggravated or their reflection is off, cameras will pick that up. As somebody said, audio would pick it up, and it would still take us 10 steps further than where we are now. And it could help be the little piece of evidence that would then push them over the line, even though they're not viewing the actual physical abuse in a bedroom. And I think that there's a few different things too. When we talk about bad apples, like real predators, I agree with everybody. A real predator is going to be hard to find. Look what happens in the real world, right? We have sexual predators out there with typical children, and they get away with it for years and years. But I think where this would really help is maybe not somebody who's a predator, but somebody who's maybe burnt out, losing a temper, too quick to push a kid around. A lot of these incidents aren't planned. You know, let's face it, our kids are behavioral. They get behavioral, the staff gets pushed to a brink, and then they have a breaking point and they strike back at our children. So it would also eliminate a lot of that. And I think something that we could talk about, Sue, when we do this and we talk about agencies, somebody said something about like a house manager being able to view this. That would not work. It has to be far above a house manager, because a house manager, sadly, could be the one doing the abuse. Chloe, okay, I'm sorry, guys. Most cases in the agency, it would be somebody who either leads quality assurance or somebody much higher up. We really wouldn't want house managers to be in charge of this type of situation.
Okay, thanks, Pam. All right, I think Rob had a couple more things you wanted to either say or ask, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute Rob.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick because my mind runs fast. Any hesitation I have, like I said, is being dissuaded here because I'm hearing the emotion of this, and that's the issue. Again, I can't imagine what you guys are dealing with. But the couple of things I had are still, I think the argument for this could be supported by the medical point there. I think that's a brilliant idea. My son, thank God, doesn't have seizures currently, but he does have something called syncope, which he goes down. He knocked a tooth out, clean out last December. So I think that's an argument that might support getting the cameras later. However the bill is crafted, as I think achievable is the biggest part of it, but it has to be effective. If we get something and it's really not effective and it's only one camera in a common area and it doesn't really capture what's happening, then we really didn't get what we were looking for. The predator thing, the bedrooms, that was another great point. Maybe, you know, if we can get it in the common area and not the bedroom, well, maybe we've made it 50% safer for our kids. And you know what? That's okay. That's 50% safer. And I agreed with that too. The other thing is obviously what other options in addition to this can we do to further improve safety? And the only one I come up with, and I'm limited here, is training for the staffing. And Pam, I think it was, made a brilliant point. My son is just 18, so he's been in different systems prior to now. And I see the staff that's in his residence, they're young. They're very young, and that's a really great point. So how can we retain staff and then train staff? Because training is great, but if we don't retain them, what good is it? Really? And there needs to be somewhat of a career path there. I believe the 2% raise for them did go through, if I remember right, recently. I'm trying to be very quick here. That's most of my points that I would add. And again, though, and I hate to keep bringing it back to it, but I get it. Funding, especially right now, is everything. And if we get this, while they keep cutting, they're going to reduce staff just to get the camera. And, you know, everything is a balance, you know, dignity, safety, everything is a balance in my perspective. And I just think we need to figure out, is there a way to get someone else to fund it and not cannibalize the agency's budgets that are really, really hurting? As we see, there's another 20% holdback in different scenarios that just came out. That's mostly family support, but that's a really big concern of mine as well. Hope I didn't talk too fast.
Nope, I was just about right, Rob. All right, thanks. The next we have EK wanted to get, I know that's not your name, but EK's iPad. I forgot her name. I am so sorry, but look for the mute button. Didn't find it yet. She's looking for it. There you go. Wait, no.
I did it before.
You did it before. Find that. There you go.
There she is.
Hi, thanks. You know, my daughter has a baby monitor in her room now because of seizures. So they can hear whatever's going on. There's not a privacy issue here. You know, I probably had to sign a piece of paper at some point. So, I mean, it is done. I know there's a big sign on the wall I saw last time while I was FaceTiming with her, something about somebody must have turned the volume down. And they said, you know, that's really serious. Whoever does that, blah, blah, blah. So I don't think that is going to be such a difficult thing to get past. I think a lot of it, we need to probably have some kind of protocol as if you don't see bruises or something physical on your child, but you know that they're acting different or something, there's got to be we have to have some kind of a plan of how you go about reporting, how, you know, the steps involved to present with it. And I think, Pam, you made a great point, and this is a different world than that original bill that was thrown out there. There are cameras everywhere, and this is life now. You know, everyone's got a little, you know, iPhone. I don't think it will be that big a deal, and it might not be that costly. You know, but we'd have to have everything really laid out. But I'm sure other people must have baby monitors in their kids' rooms at residential. Nobody?
If I could just add to that, was your name Sue Stern?
Karen.
Karen Stern. I believe in the current laws or codes out there, either at the federal or state level, they talk about the use of surveillance in two situations: for medical or behavioral reasons. Medical or behavioral. So the use of a monitor, you mentioned seizures, would tie with the statute and the exception or provision that allows it. In those circumstances, I guess, where the clinical team agrees that a monitor is needed for a seizure disorder or incontinence or whatever might be happening in the bedroom, and they put the baby monitor in there. So that's just a background that there are some limited exceptions around medical or behavioral reasons to use surveillance, and they were very smart and clever about limiting it as such, not just for what they would call convenient surveillance, but for medical or behavioral. And the cost question, I know we've all talked about that, Rob and Karen, and everybody's mentioned it. The cost is probably not so much in the cameras. I believe ultimately where the cost may rack up a little bit would be in the storage of the video over time. I think if you consider a camera surveillance system in a facility that writes the video and audio to a DVR or a network recording, it's an NVR or a DVR, and it's basically a hard disk, right? You could potentially automate that, and Bob's going to correct me if I stray because I'm the banker and he's the IT guy. and the security person, but if you could potentially automate a job where every night at midnight, the video from that DVR box in the residence goes up to the cloud. So now it's on the cloud, right? And nobody touches it. There's just a job, a script that's written that says at midnight, that video from that day gets written up to the cloud. Now it's secured in the cloud, and maybe some centralized authority like the Justice Center or OPWDD or the police have access to that video. Just a couple of comments.
It's that is one way to do it, but you know, and over this last week, I spoke to a bunch of guys at my job that sell these camera systems, and the vast majority, 99%, there's an exception here and there, but the storage is usually local, and that is because you know, in a typical home, you may have 12, 15 cameras, even if it's only 6 or 8. To upload that real time 24/7 to the cloud, it requires a huge pipe, a lot of bandwidth, and a much more expensive. It's not just the expense. As you're right, it's not just the storage space. In that case, it would be the bandwidth that was required. I mean, we're in different regions, but I know down here on Long Island, I mean, if you want that kind of bandwidth, you have to pay dearly for it. And you know, we're probably not quite as expensive as some of the other, you know, remote regions if you want really good bandwidth. So typically what we do, you know, what, you know, and other companies that do these security cameras, we typically will sell it in a way of having it local storage, secured. It's very cheap to have, you know, 4, 5, 6, 8 terabytes of data stored locally and accessed when needed over the web. But you know, yeah, there are exceptions, and you know, but again, storage, you know, online, Google or wherever you want to get it from, it does get quite costly. And also, you know, we all see every so often you get even a bank or a big company or whatever where things get, you know, hijacked, you know, and to have that constantly available 24/7 on the cloud, not available, but out there, you know, streaming on the internet is a risk that is going to probably be a big hurdle to jump as well. So that's just from an IT and a security perspective, you know, from my 2 cents, but I'll leave it at that. And I think we're kind of we're probably putting the cart before the horse a little bit on that, because, you know, we have a lot of hurdles to jump if we do want to end up getting these cameras in place before we get to that specific argument. So if we want to go on to the next person, I saw Noran had her hand up for a bit. I don't know who that is on the top left. Dell, I saw your hand earlier. Is that Bev?
We got Bev. Is that Beverly?
Oh, yeah, that's Bev. Yeah, I
John
recognized.
Reed, and then I think Mona wanted to go. Dave G.
Yep. Okay.
It is me.
Bev had her hand up for a while back, and I didn't.
Thank you. Thank
Go ahead,
you.
Bev.
I just want to say that I have 2 children in group homes, one on both ends of the spectrum. One is very verbal, one is nonverbal. Verbal abuse is just as dangerous as physical abuse. And 90% of the time, it starts out as verbal abuse. And as the time goes on, it accumulates, and that's when the physical abuse comes in. My daughter was in the group home that the manager did get arrested. I brought up 5 allegations on her to the Justice Center. They were found, nothing was found. My daughter was removed from that house because of me, because of the physical abuse, and 18 months later, we now see where that manager is. So as far as this Justice Center or the Quality Assurance Department or anything else, I'm not a fan. I would never go to them again. I just really feel that audio has to be, even more so than visual, because if you can't hear it, you can't see it. You need to hear it. They found Robin, who is very verbal, as you all know. They twisted it on her. They made her look like she was, you know, there's a reason why she's in a group home, right? And they didn't believe her, but she doesn't know how to lie. She said what she heard, and it was twisted. You know, she misunderstood. It wasn't the way it was said. 5 times the Justice Center has allegations, and they never found any justice for it. So I'm a very big fan of everything across the board. I don't care where you put it, but just put it.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Bev. All right, next we have Elise Orlando. Let me find you on the screen someplace. There you are. I'm going to unmute you, and you can go ahead.
Did I unmute myself? Yes.
You did.
I just want to say I'm very much in favor of, cameras and audio, one or the other or both. My son is a very low functioning nonverbal, and I would never know other than the fact that, he spends the whole day with me on the weekend, and I literally, inspect him and, help him shower so I can, check out anything. But I just want to be a devil's advocate for a minute here, thinking from the agency's perspective. I mean, all of us are pretty much focused on abuse, any kind of verbal abuse or physical abuse and things like that. And I wonder if the agencies would then want to look at the the footage and say, oh, well, this procedure wasn't carried out properly, or this escalated because of this. And, and that ends up, making staff, not necessarily, you know, called out on abuse or something like that, but more of like a procedural thing that they didn't follow. And, we all know that, things sometimes they get followed. 98% of the time they procedurally do, but then maybe something doesn't happen. And I don't want the staff to get, like, for example, like last week when I went to, or a couple weeks ago when I went to the house, there was still when we were only having outside visits, and they took our temps on the front porch, but it was like 100 degrees. So both my husband and I, were like above 99. And then we moved into the shade. And then the next time we went, that we were joking around, and the fellow who let us in said, "Oh, come on, I know you guys are fine. You don't have to have your temp checked." Now, I mean, I didn't have a problem with it. He didn't have a problem with it. No one's going to know about it. But let's say, the agency then reviews that and says, "Oh, well, here he is letting these parents in without checking, going through procedure." I just don't want to see it used for the wrong thing,
Yeah, I think that, the idea would be that the tape would only be pulled if there was a sense of abuse, if there was an allegation. It wouldn't be reviewed just, randomly or willy-nilly to monitor, see if staff is on their iPhone or on Facebook, or, if procedures are being followed. To me, I mean, if there's physical evidence of injury, somebody, is beat up, that tape should immediately be provided pretty much to law enforcement, because it's a possible crime. But at least I don't think that what you're talking about. I hear you, but and I wouldn't go that far. It wouldn't be. It would only be pulled for investigation reasons.
All right, thanks. All right, next we have Leslie Rudin. Let me ask. I know it's not Leslie on the camera, but that's what the screen says the name is. So go ahead.
Hi, it's John Rudin. Leslie's sitting here with me. Our son Daniel was subject of medical neglect. The Justice Center investigated it and found that it was correct. It was substantiated. Daniel, our son, also cited an individual of physical abuse, and that was unfounded. He repeated it, or repeated the person's name 90 days after the incident, and it was unfounded because they didn't feel he could express how the abuse occurred or what the abuse was. He could only say that an individual hurt him, and that was too unspecific. So if he had a camera, or there were cameras that could validate what he said, that individual would no longer be there. And the investigation would have been substantiated. In general, I look at this as discrimination. Every citizen has the right to have a cell phone. Every cell phone has a camera. Every citizen has the right to take pictures of any incident. Many take pictures now and they go viral and they create a whirlwind of dispute and discrimination and abuse. These things are captured by average citizens. Why can't our individuals capture this? Because they don't have the intellectual capacity. Some are not verbal. Some don't understand how to use a cell phone. They don't know how to turn on the camera. But they have the right. So somehow we need to preserve their right to take video like every other average citizen. It's not just for people that have the capability to take pictures. We must assist them and aid them to take videos just like everybody else. Law enforcement has body cams. Maybe our individuals should have body cams. And they should be personal. And it should be their personal right. We're talking about legislation, and I'm talking about infringement of rights of people that have disabilities because they don't have the same right to take video like the average citizen. Nobody's denied having a cell phone. Neither should our individuals be denied of having a cell phone. Unfortunately, many don't have the intellectual capacity to use them in a manner to protect themselves. And many other average citizens use them to protect themselves.
Okay, thanks.
Bob, can I just jump in for a sec?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, John, you got me thinking about that from a different perspective now with this self-monitoring or video or recording. And I don't know if it's possible technologically or outlandish, but the idea of like my son wearing a watch that captures audio that then I could pick up on my iPhone or that is stored. Now, obviously, a bad person might take the watch off them before they hit them, but they might not know that the watch is recording audio. So, you know, if my son is in his bedroom or in a hallway or in an outing and he has a watch on that's collecting audio that I could either retrieve in real time or after the fact, that I just thought about that as you were saying that, John. Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah, the technology is, there's all sorts of technologies out there that can do these kinds of things, for sure.
Let's after you're done, Bob, you finish, but then let's get Dave in.
Yeah, I see Dave raising his hand. He has something he wants to say about that. Go ahead, Dave. Unmute yourself.
Let me say something.
Go ahead.
I'm going to let Mona talk. I just wanted to say one thing about that audio monitoring thing. We had a thing for our son. It's called Angel Sense. It's for people with like Alzheimer's and stuff, basically. But you can connect it to a piece of their clothing or belt or backpack, whatever. They can't take it off. And you can monitor it, Russ.
And staff can't take it off either.
It can't be removed from whatever you put it on. It's like those security things in the store. But I just want to say that that kind of thing is available, Russ, and you could do that. We had it and we bought it, and the Center for Disabilities made us take it off because they were concerned about privacy. But that was probably 5 years ago, so we're in a little different space now with the technology. But I'm going to let Mona talk.
Oh yeah, the Angel Sense has the word Angel Sense on the back of the little box, and that's somebody must have Googled what it was because you really can't identify what it is. So as long as you cover that part up or obscure it, I don't think you'll have a problem. But anyway, getting back to our story, our son is nonverbal and he's been in a group home for a number of years, same group home, multiple different staff. The reason why I wanted to say something was because we all want to get cameras in group homes. However, we also have our loved ones going to day habs or day programs. And so an incident can happen on a transportation, on a bus. And the group home can then blame the bus or the transportation or, always trying to blame somebody else. That's particularly what happened in our instance. My son we go down there like all the time, and we live within walking distance. My son was dropped off from his day program to his residence, and the residents called us like right away, which was great. And they said something's kind of squishy with Joey's arm. And my husband was home. He went right down within 5 minutes and called me up because I was at work. And I said, take him right to the hospital. He took him to the hospital. I met him there. He had a broken arm. So Joey is in a wheelchair that is secured to the bus, and is also put in a seatbelt on the wheelchair itself. So he can't get off or anything like that. So long story short, moving forward, we had an investigator look into it because, we wanted some answers as to how did he get his arm broke. Narrowing it down using GPS on the bus, and what the investigator came up with, we kind of feel that it was happened on the bus somehow. But during that time frame, going through the Justice Center, they of course want to blame somebody else. And the point is that the way that we got to have somebody get, I guess, responsible for it was through his plan of care or his IEP or whatever plan they have, is that he had instructions in there to be within a line of sight. And so when we hired an attorney, that's what the attorney used to hold them liable, and that they didn't follow that plan. And by the way, they also, our son's house had hired multiple lawyers so that we could not attain a lawyer that was local. So we had to go down to New York City to get one. So those are kind of things just to keep in mind, that maybe we should also include buses as well as within our residences and day habs, because although that's a lot, it's still something that Justice Center is going to say, hey, it might have been this one or that one. And then you also have to consider if they're in two separate counties, we feel that calling the police is better than calling the Justice Department initially, or Justice Center. So I guess the point is that, feel free to call your police department as well, because the Justice Center is, that's like the chicken in the hen house kind of thing. They're watching over each other. So.
All right. Thanks, Mona. All right, next we have Pam. Actually, you know what, Pam, I don't want to skip you, but Noran had her hand up before, and then she took it down. She was next, so I'm going to let Noran go first, and then I'll go back to you, Pam. Go ahead, Noran.
Thank you. I had my question or whatever answered before, but then I also was going to mention the bus as well, because my son is also in a wheelchair. And if something had been on the bus, it would have been proven that they were negligent. They left him on the bus by himself, and his brakes weren't on. He went off the ramp. It rolled down the ramp and flipped the chair over. He ended up in the hospital. And they tried to blame him for doing it, saying that, well, he took his brakes off before we could get to him when we came around the back. And that's not what the story was at the hospital. So somehow it all changed so that they weren't at blame. But you're right, on the bus, at day programs, wherever our kids are, there needs to be some sort of coverage, some sort of safety net to make sure that they're okay.
Okay, thanks, Noran. I'm going to go to Pam now. And I see Teresa has her hand up, so we'll go next after Pam.
To Nora Ann and to Mona, I wanted to say they're absolutely right about the vans needing cameras. And what's interesting is a lot of the agencies, their fleets of vans already have cameras, but they're forward facing. meaning it's to determine what happens in an accident.
Right.
So the expense obviously isn't that great because they've already done it. So a lot of the vans do have, so in other words, if you hit a car in front of you or you run a red light or a stop sign, they're able to do it. All the vans have GPS tracking, but there should be a camera facing into the van as well. Simple things like Nora said, was he not locked in to begin with? Is that, so that's a definite. And then I just wanted to let Elise know, she had asked about 10 minutes ago, she was concerned about possibly losing staff because of cameras and, if the agencies would use it to be like judgmental of staff. And I just want to let you know, in my agency, my son is in a children's residence and we are allowed to have cameras. And when this camera fight came up a few years ago, that was a big concern brought up by parents and the agency. And we didn't lose any staff once we put cameras in. In other words, nobody said, oh, you're going to catch me on my phone, I'm quitting. So I just want you to know that I think Russell had mentioned the cameras are only viewed for abuse and neglect cases or incidents of unknown origin. So the staff isn't questioned in that way. And it does, somebody mentioned earlier, it does also protect staff, because we do sometimes have individuals who accuse staff of something, or somebody mentioned before, I think they were saying it in a negative way, but if we look at it the other way, if a child has a seizure and falls and gets all banged up, and their plan isn't that they have to be line of sight, maybe they're every 15 minutes, it could also show a staff did not abuse somebody, that the child got hurt on his own. And I'm going to speak for myself. My son is very behavioral. So when my son comes home with a lot of bruises, there are the bruises I know he creates himself, but that's something as parents that we have to face too. And sometimes a camera could show, hey, your kid punched the wall or did this or did that. So the cameras actually can also protect staff. That's all. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks, Pam. We have Teresa. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. I was involved with advocating, for years on the state level with a prior state senator. And it was during the time when, after the New York Times articles came out with abuse in state-run and operated group homes. And we were drafting legislation, different pieces, because at that point, there was no central point of registry for anybody with a prior conviction. All right, so that got taken care of. But there was a group of us parents who were against the formation of the Justice Center. Prior to that, there was a Commission on the Quality of Care. They would do the New York Times articles that would show that they didn't know what they were doing. But that was pushed through by the governor. There was a package put together in response to the New York Times articles, and there was nothing parents could say. I was on the interview with the initial director of the Justice Center to pick him, but it was already a done deal what was going to happen. So I'm just saying these things to let you know that the more you can get a bunch of representatives in your pocket to do this and to draft your legislation, the better you are. I know that Andrea Stewart-Cousins in Westchester she's the leader of the Senate right now. And she has a great affinity for people with disabilities. She's been that way for many years. If there's, a way you could get her in your corner, it'll go a long way. But I'm saying, even with what you have, if you get these cameras, and I'm all for them, they're the best thing in the world. And you can look at it in a positive way too. It could be if somebody doesn't learning a skill, you could also say, if you have a program that's willing to look at it and say, oh, this is what you're doing wrong, to try to teach so-and-so something, Doesn't always have to be negative, everything. But my main point is, be careful with the fight and the legislation. And one other point, I just wonder how agencies will take this. Will they look at it? Will they fight it? I've had, how are they going to fight it? I had that with, it was a group, we had nurses that were fighting people that had self-direction. And they, excuse me, couldn't have giving medication in a home without nurse approval. And, you know, that had to be fought. But because I had an in with a state senator at that time, he's no longer a state senator, I was on the radar. And I got a call saying the nurses union is coming. And I said, call so-and-so and get this. I want you to talk to this other parent. They're in the know. So, I mean, I just want to let you know, I don't want to discourage anybody. You always got to keep fighting. But some of the legislation, definitely legislation that's on the books now, if there's any way that could be looked at, that would be great. And the other thing I always wished for was there was a short pamphlet that told parents in easy English and a reference to statute what their rights are under New York state and federal law. That makes it easy, and mandated trainings for parents that they used to have for when your kids were young, but they don't, once they go into an adult program, unless you dig yourself, you don't know what your federal rights are and your state rights are. And it's just a side thing that I think that kind of legislation would be easier to get through, but I'm all for the cameras, and the cameras are number one.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. I think we don't have anybody waiting in line. I'm gonna go ahead and let Russ wrap things up here, I think. If anybody else has anything else to say, raise your hand, but I think we've hit it pretty well. So go ahead, Russ.
Okay, so did anybody not get to speak that would like to speak at this point? That changed their mind and wasn't online? Okay. If not, then I'll go. So I think that what we've heard tonight has been really enlightening. I think everybody made great points, and I think there's a lot of things to consider here and take away in terms of looking back at the attempts at legislation in the past, thinking about the perspectives and angles of other parties like the agencies, the service providers, elected officials, staff, and how they might perceive this and what's in it for them. If you're going to pass legislation and you're going to get some kind of consensus or majority position on anything, you have to show value or something in it for the other parties. It could end up becoming a mandate. I think Pam posted that on the chat. Says if something is mandated, you have to follow it. But we also have to live and coexist peacefully with these agencies and service providers. I've always said that the relationship with the families and the service providers or the agencies has to be a partnership and not an adversarial relationship. If it is, then one party's got to go. You don't want to spend your life in an adversarial relationship with somebody taking care of your most precious cargo in the world. And if you're in an adversarial relationship, you got to change your posture or you got to get a new agency. It's as simple as that. So we really have to think about how they'll perceive it. Will it just be another burden on them, another cost? Is it, are we going to be perceived as troublemakers? And, there's a lot of things to think about. I think Ellen made a point to me earlier today, because I put a PowerPoint out there where I tried to lay out the pros and cons of it. And if you look at it, you can't just go by, well, how many bullet points are in which column? Are there more cons than pros? And, Ellen kind of said, well, if you look at one point about cameras are there to prevent or identify abuse, that may be the only point you need to know. But there's other points on there too that might be material, and they may not be all equally weighted, and it's not a horse race of how many points in favor or how many points against. One single point can swing the whole boat. And I think the challenge that we have is, this is not a one size fits all. I mean, there may be self-advocates, there may be higher functioning folks or whatever, where they don't want cameras in their homes, they may not need them. The lower functioning, the thing that I struggle with, and I have a 24-year-old son in a group home who's nonverbal, behavioral, lower functioning. If he gets slapped around or abused or really injured, I'm at the mercy of God at that point. And I will tell you that in terms of the children's residential program that Pam referenced before, and maybe some other ones that are out there, in the state or in other states. I've done some research. The anecdotal feedback that I have so far, and I know some of you folks are on the incident review committees in these agencies, the anecdotal feedback that I have so far is that since the implementation of the cameras and with the video, being pulled in certain situations to aid certain investigations, the feedback is that they've been helpful, that they have been helpful. They have not always solved the problem. They have not always covered the area or a situation that needed to be covered. But I did get some sense and some anecdotal information relayed to me by the folks that do these investigations and that live this, that the video is a companion, it's an aid, and it's a tool to investigations, and it has helped. And I think that's an important thing to consider when you look at the posture of an agency or staff members or families. I think Rob and others on the call talked about the word effectiveness. You know, you can spend money, you can video people, you can store the tape, you can do all these other things and operationalize it and put a process and a policy in place. But the question is, how effective is it? How effective? So we've got to look at and that's that anecdotal feedback that I just relayed to you is going right toward that point of effectiveness, right from people doing investigations and leading those functions. So I think we've got to be mindful of the cost, the practicality and feasibility. I think there are some parents or families or guardians that just jump in all in head first and say cameras are a must, it's a no-brainer, but you really have to look at the details in. I think conceptually, philosophically, emotionally, ideologically, we're all in on it here. We're all on board. But you know, to the point Sue was making before and Teresa around the legislation and the bills, the devil is in the details. So the way a bill is written and what's in it and how it lays out how this is actually going to work. Would there be audio in bedrooms? Do people have to consent? Families or guardians have to consent to the use of this? And in the CRP situation, you had to have everybody in a group home, in a residence, agree to the use of those cameras. If one person said no or didn't vote, they couldn't do it. That's correct, right, Pam? Just to yeah. So Pam's. So I just, you know, there's a lot of nuances and wrinkles and details with this in terms of the way you would write a bill. But I think the most important thing is for everybody who's, you know, passionate about the subject, who has a view on it, to have all of the information possible, all the facts, think about it from all sides. And you may or may not want to. You may just have made up your mind and said, look, my child has been abused, or, you know, I've been through this before, and most of us have been, and it's a no-brainer. And that's fine. So we get behind it. Let's let the process roll. Sue and her organization with Nassau Suffolk Autism Society of the Americas is, besides doing this, I mean, they do yeoman's work and phenomenal heavy lifting and work on the ground. And then the fact that they're involved in this with, you know, their lobby firm, and we've got we've got elected officials in New York State behind this. I think this could be the time. And I think it's going to depend, like what Sue said, is we need to see more details, you know, behind this in terms of what this bill is going to look like. Before I say final closing remarks, Sue, did you want to say anything? I know you've listened to this and spoken before. Do you want to say anything too before we wrap the meeting?
No, just that I think all of us live in all different areas. And when we get to the point that we're going to need as many political allies as we can find, I think that's where we're going to need the help of the big group. I know, Russell, your group now, the membership is almost 5,000 in such a short amount of time, which is very impressive. My group is over 3,000 families. And all those families have friends and families. So I think the big thing that we're going to need is to be a cohesive group that really enlists everybody to support this. All these people, you know, even though our children don't vote, their family and friends vote. So we're going to really need to stick together and work as a group to get support of our elected officials that, you know, we elect them, we vote. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sue. So you all see where we are with this now, is that there's a bill being drafted, you know, by a lobby firm and a senator and their offices, hopefully to, you know, have some semblance or shape by September, be kicked around, and hopefully something by the end of the year, early next year, and, you know, an angle or a way for individual families, groups to hit this is through their elected officials, like Sue said. You know, if this is going to end up on the floor in Albany, for a vote, and it's going to need sponsorship. It's going to need to make it to the floor, and it's going to need to be voted on. Maybe, need governor support. You have to hit this through your elected officials, and whatever side of the coin you're on, and I think most, if not all, people are in favor of this very heavily. Need to, let their elected officials know that. But again, I think the real key here is what's going to be in the bill. What is it going to look like? How would it work? What would it cover? How would it apply? And when would this video be used? I think is really, the concept that 60,000 feet of putting, cameras or surveillance in a residence, in a facility, is one thing. And we can all grasp that and walk away and understand at a high level what that means. But when you start to distill it down, like we were talking about things, how would the video be stored? Who would have access to it? Would law enforcement get it? Do agencies, investigate themselves? Would we have audio? Would it be on transportation? Would it be in day haps? If you don't have that string of continuity between residents, transportation, and day programs, somebody said it, that they all point the finger at each other and say it happened on the bus, it happened on the day, in the day program, and everybody's looking at the next person and saying, who? Not me, it wasn't me. So I think you have to start somewhere. And correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, Sue, but if you try to bite off too much, a lot of times this thing ends up just dropping from its own weight and never gets off the ground. But if we can get something as a starting point that everybody can kind of latch onto, then you can work on it. You can build on it in the future legislatively. But you got to start somewhere and get something out there that is almost like bulletproof, that people will look at it and they'll say, there's no way that you cannot support this or do it, because it's just within a certain bounds of reasonableness. And then there's other things over time that you can build into it. I'm going to pause there. Anybody else have any other comments or thoughts they want to add before we wrap?
Go ahead, Dave.
I think, Russ, you're right. I know Mona was saying, and a lot of us were agreeing that we need to make it kind of all inclusive for day hab, residents, and transportation. But I think you're correct. If we keep it narrowly focused to residences to start with, that'll eliminate at least one place they can point to if something did, God forbid, happen. So anything we can get will be a win. And if we need to narrow it down to just the residents that we're going to shoot for the cameras, the residences, and just the common areas even, I think that'd be a good point to start at.
Yeah,
and
baby steps, I mean.
Yeah, once you're in there, you're right, Bob. Once we're in there, then we next time our next step will be, hey, they're working this good for this in the common areas. Maybe the day hab should have them too. So baby steps is right, Bob.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Rob, I know you were probably the only person that started out the call somewhat undecided, and I know you were leaning a little bit toward the pro side through some of our threads on the group page, but I assume that you largely came in undecided, and we really needed to, to provide some information. Were there any questions or things that were still unanswered for you?
No, pretty much most of my questions were answered. I know the way my mind works is I get into the details way down the line. That's where I start with the end in mind. And whatever legislation we wind up with, we're now stuck with. So I'm working backwards saying, let's make sure whatever it is we get, we don't regret. There isn't some kind of ancillary issue that somebody worked into this that winds up counterproductive for our kids. And that's why I just go through all the details. But as a gut reaction, especially listening to everyone again, it is a no-brainer. My hesitation is just, let's do it right. Let's be as effective as we can be while it being achievable. That's really the discourse I just wanted to have. And I am and continue to be in support of it in the common areas. And just, I won't repeat everything you said, but with all those points that came out tonight, I think it's a really great, it's a great place to start. I just don't want to limit our view on this to just going after cameras. Like you said, this is a much bigger issue, and we need to make sure somehow we work in the other things, a la the Justice Center and Disability Rights New York, and how ineffective they are.
Yeah, and there are other things coupled with this around training that we talked about,
Right.
paying, better pay for staff and reducing turnover and retention of staff. There's other things that can complement the use of cameras. There's no silver bullet. It's a toolbox.
Exactly.
And cameras is one set of tools and audio in this. And I think so, there was a lot of questions that came up through the evening around how this would all work, and many of them were answered. But if not, I mean, it's probably at some point for some one of us, myself or somebody, to just, we should have a list of questions, kind of like an FAQ or a list of questions, and just to make sure that they're answered and maybe they're written down somewhere, so that if somebody says, well, how would this work, with the video, or who would have access, or who would pay for it, and maybe the list just includes really like open questions that are really unanswered yet and need to be worked out through the bill legislation. And I think that everybody is anxious and waiting to see what a bill would look like. I know personally, I'm for it in concept, philosophically, ideologically, emotionally, but I also want to make sure that there's something there that makes sense, that would actually work and be effective, as to just opposed to writing legislation and say put cameras up on the wall, and then you kind of have a Pandora's box or a hornet's nest of a process. And if it doesn't end up being effective, but the experience that we do have with the CRP and the use of the video there as a precedent is encouraging. It's positive in terms of aiding investigations. So, that's important information to look at, because that's in practice. It was hard fought for. Parents had to approve it. Agencies may or may not have been happy about it, but in reality, it's helping them. So sometimes you fight for something, you object to it initially, but you kind of know halfway in your back of your mind it's really going to help you. So that's about it. I think this was really good. Hopefully we got a lot of good information out there. If there's other questions, or you guys think of anything offline, just let us know. I think the next steps would be just to see how this legislation comes together. Let the working group, the very, very small committee that Sue's involved with, I help out, let that process happen. And if you're passionate about, anything as a must inclusion, or, something that you feel needs to be part of or considered or whatever, let us know. But I think we kind of covered a lot of it. And these are probably a lot of the things, Sue, that we've talked about in the little working group and committee, and that, the senator and the lobbying committee are well aware of and have jotted these points down, or factoring them into the legislation. So let's see how that comes together. And at some point, if we can look at it or get a chance to talk about it, September or beyond, we should really do that, because I think we've had the discussion now around our feelings, our perspectives, our experiences, and our views on this. I think we really need, in order for us to take the next step, is to see what this would look like on paper in terms of a bill. Does that make sense?
Sounds good. So I think we'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for coming, and we will see you on the group. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone. Be well.